Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Tim Corpus, and today we're going to take a look at something we've kind of talked about before, which is Dorico, and using TouchOSC with Dorico. Now, Dorico by Steinberg is a notation software, and a lot of these principles of using TouchOSC work with a lot of different notation software. So this includes Finale, which I have talked about before. So maybe take a look at that video if you're using Finale. I still use Finale from time to time, but I've been transitioning over to Dorico because it's really been saving me a lot of time with what I'm doing, especially in making parts. But one of the ways that I save more time and really perfect the workflow is using TouchOSC, which of course we've talked about a lot here. But I'm going to show you some specifics of how I use it with Dorico. And this is advanced over a while, right? Because about a year ago, I think it was, that I talked about Dorico and the transition from Finale to Dorico. So now we're going to take a look at some of the real shortcuts, the real ways that I use TouchOSC with Dorico, and why I think it's really helpful and you should be using these types of things too. So what we're going to do is first talk about the connectivity between the two. It's very simple, especially if you're on a Mac. I'm on a PC, but if you're on a Mac and you've got any sort of MIDI device, Mac has a really good system for tracking that. So if you're also unfamiliar with TouchOSC overall, this is probably not the place you want to start. You should go check out my Back to Basics video, which will catch you up to speed on how to get TouchOSC on your device and how to connect that to your computer. But assuming you've done that, now we're going to do the next step. So here in TouchOSC, I have my device connected. I feel like I say this every single time, but you can see it. It's on my iPad, everything's working, and it's already connected up here. So hopefully you've gotten that far with what you're doing. And now we're just gonna make a really simple button because I'm gonna show you how to check to make sure that TouchOSC is working with Dorico. So let's just add a button here. And I'm gonna put this up here in the corner. And Dorico is pretty smart, which is great. So what we're gonna do to test this is we're basically gonna make a MIDI note, like a keyboard note, and we're gonna send that to make sure it's connecting to Dorico. But the flow of how you wanna do this is make sure TouchOSC is connected to your computer, make sure that's all good to go, and then turn on Dorico, open it up, and then we'll make sure it's paired. But you want to make sure that your MIDI device, the TouchOSC on your tablet, is connected to your computer first. This kind of is the process with any DAW and any system. You want to make sure that the MIDI system, device, whatever, is turned on before you launch your DAW or your notation software. So this button here, I'm going to make this nice and bright. And what we're going to do is add a MIDI message. So down here in the corner. All right, and so this is a CC message, a control change. And we've talked about a lot of these before, but we're gonna use a note on. And right now we have it as a constant with program channel 1. We're gonna change the index to a constant because I want to specify which note. And for this, I'm just gonna do 14, that's fine. You'll see why this matters in a second. This has to do with what note we're sending. And if it's too low, we may not hear it, maybe outside of the range of our receiving device. In this case, it's Dorico. But that's it. That's all we need set here. So let's jump into Dorico. So here we have Dorico. And this is just a fresh project that I opened up, nothing special in it. And if we head over to play, so we have our button in our TouchOSC template, and let's try it out to see if everything is connected to Dorico. So we are getting a sound, it's very low. Let's go ahead and change that note in TouchOSC. So if we select our button here, and let's change this to like 60. And now back in Dorico. Yeah. So we can really hear it, and we can see that everything's working. So since TouchOSC is sending a MIDI message and Dorico is happily receiving that, what we're gonna do is set up some MIDI CC messages. So these are gonna be used kind of as our shortcuts. It's kind of the same thing as if you were to set up a macro, Control-Shift-R for record, something like that, right? you could do that, and you could have your fingers remember all of these different shortcuts. I find when I'm working with so many different programs, like literally in a day, it could be Pro Tools, Reaper, Dorico, Finale, Adobe After Effects, a whole bunch of things. And for me, I just think it's too much work to have to remember all of the different, keys, the shortcuts, all those different things. So really that's what TouchOSC is doing for us. It is sending our shortcuts, our macros, and we're doing that as a MIDI CC message. And I'm going to set it up on program channel 1. I do have a MIDI keyboard that I work with when I'm working in Dorico, but I've never had any issues with it conflicting, so I don't see a problem with putting it program channel 1. You could put it at a different program channel if you want. I don't know that it really matters for what we're doing. We're not really doing super advanced things with MIDI CC here. So now that we know that it's working, let's take a look at a few of my favorite ways to use TouchOSC in Dorico. So to get things started, let's make some music in Dorico. All right, let's go back to right here. And we need to add a lot of information just to make this work. So I'm just going to do a nice nice scale. That looks great. And let's just replicate this a bunch of times down here. I'm going to copy this, paste here. Let's drop this down the octave and repeat that. All right, so this is currently a piano, but that doesn't really matter. What we're really looking at is how TouchOSC can, interact with this. So let's add some dynamics here. All right. Cool, so we have that. Let's add some, like a staccato, and then another staccato, and then put an accent there. These are kind of random. I obviously am not really thinking about what we need to be doing here. And then actually let's add thirds above. So Shift I and then 3. All right, so now I'm adding thirds above. And then actually here, we're gonna select these 2 notes as well. Shift I and throw up the octave. Cool. And then what we're gonna do here, let's hit enter. I'm gonna put in some quarter notes. And let's just go F, E, C. All right, there we go. And all right, so let's add another voice. All right, so that's really messy looking, but that's what we want. So you'll understand why here in a second. So let's add a couple more dynamics. So we have a lot going on here in our messy score, and we're going to take a look at filters, because filters are something I use all the time when I'm writing, especially as I'm editing and I want to, change dynamics, move things around. So one of my favorite buttons that I add is a filter. So let's go ahead and create that in TouchOSC. So one of the things I like to do, let's create a box right now. First thing we're going to do is this. And this, we'll see why. Let's make this a lighter color, something less offensive. Bring down the alpha here. And then let's add a label. Open this up, and I'm going to call this filter. So moving this in here, I'm going to get rid of the background, the outline, don't really want any of that. And we're going to make this a nice bright yellow. And actually, let's make the font a little bit bigger. Cool. So this is our section of filters. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to select our text here, and I'm going to lock them. So now let's add a button. All right, so we have one button here, and let's make a couple. I'm going to copy and paste this, and then select these both, copy and paste. Cool. So our first button, what I want to filter out is dynamics. So let's go ahead and add a label just so we can remember what it is we're doing. I'm going to get rid of my background and outline, and I'm going to call this dynamics. So this has no message, but if we select our button here, let's add a MIDI message, And it is a CC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to constant, and I want this to be control 1, and we'll just start it on CC1. That's fine. And so this is going to filter for dynamics. We're going to add one for playing techniques. All right, so let's add another label here. Same as always. Get rid of this stuff. And then this is going to be playing techniques. That's too big, so we're going to have to stretch this out. And also lower the font size. Of course, in your own template, you can figure out what's the best size for everything. But right now, just for show, that's what we're going to leave it as. And now with this button, we're going to have to add a MIDI message. And then we already have it as a control change. And now we're using number 2, right, for this. So while we're at it, we're going to add MIDI messages to these two. One thing I like to do that I've talked about before is I have a spreadsheet that just keeps track of all of my different CC, because it can get tough as, let's say you work on this template and then you don't come back to it for another 7 months. So maybe you have things moved around and it's not necessarily in a numerical order anymore. So having a spreadsheet where you keep track of what all the CC you're using is can be a really helpful way to stay organized. You could also leave it in the notes of your TouchOSC template. So let's add another set of labels here. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to take this, copy and paste, and then paste again. And what we're going to filter for these are going to be bottom, or actually let's put top note and bottom note. And again, this is a little bit bigger, so we're going to have to spread this out. Cool. So let's go into Dorico. So we've added some articulations here, some playing techniques. So we're going to head over here to Edit and then Preferences. And where we're going is Key Commands. So here is a cool area. So all the things that you can sync are right here, and there's a MIDI Learn option with the MIDI CC. So what we're looking for is dynamics. So let's go to Filter, and you can see these are all of the filters that we could sync with. So we're going to select all dynamics, and then here we hit this keyboard, and then let's push our button, and you can see CC1. So let's add that command and apply. And then the next thing we're looking for is playing techniques. So actually what we're going to search is playing. And you can see there are a couple different places there's playing techniques, but what we're looking for is under filter. So right here, same before, we click this button, sync it up and apply. And then we're looking for the top note. Great, and I'm actually going to close this. Top note, add that, and then bottom note. Add, and then apply. Dorico makes this super simple with communication between the TouchOSC template or any MIDI device and Dorico. So this is really great. And this leaves really the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do with communicating. So let's see how all of this works in real life. So we're going through, and let's say we have this dynamic here and we want to get rid of it. It's an accident. So what we could do is select this dynamic, or if this was a situation where there were a bunch of different dynamics, we could select this whole measure and then hit our filter button on our template, and then it filters out just the dynamics. Nice and easy. Same thing with the playing techniques. I select the whole measure and then playing techniques, and it'll filter it out. And then I can just delete it. Or I could filter it out and maybe I wanted to move it left or right, something like that. And the cool thing with this, here we go, if you're trying to select the notes, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult about selecting the top or bottom note, we can just use our button here to select the top or bottom note. So here, let's check out down here. We have 3 notes there. So we're going to select the top note, And because they are overlaying, it's going to select both of them. If we had a situation like right here, top note, it is just going to select this. We could delete that. In this situation, if we were to hit the bottom note, it's going to hit all of them. So it's going to select the whole section, which is great because perhaps in something like this, you want to move that all up. So Alt, and then you can move that around. Or you could switch to just the top notes, and now it's leaving them out to move to there. So it's a little bit, you have to work around with it. So select top note, and you can see it's selecting all of the top notes. So filters are super powerful in Dorico. I suggest you use them. So now we're going to take a look at some of my favorites, which are in my template. So I'm going to show you that, and you can see kind of how these work in Dorico. So this is one of my current Dorico templates, and you can see I have the filters because they're super helpful. I also added emojis, which kind of help visually keep it organized, which I really like. So they're a cool thing, which I've shown before. So something I've talked about before is a pop-up message. So if I hit manual, it shows all of the different shift and then a letter. So to create ornaments, playing techniques, chords, just in case I forget those. It's just a quick and easy way to look things up, which is very helpful. Another one that I love is changing the grid. So check this out. Here in measure 15, we're going to select in, and I could be inputting notes, right? B, C, D, and I'm doing that as a quarter note. So on my number pad, of course, I can change if I want this to be a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, whatever. But I can change the grid as well with TouchOSC. So set it to a half note, I can move it to a quarter, and I have it all the way down to 30-second notes because I don't really need beyond that, and then sometimes as a whole note. So the reason that's really helpful is if I was to select this, and I could Alt, move that over, and I move it over a whole measure, and then all of a sudden I can move easily around the grid, which I find nice and helpful. Something like that. Another one on here that I really like is grouping and ungrouping. All right, so let's take a look at a situation here. We select this first measure, and we're going to Shift D, and we're going to input a crescendo. So this crescendo has dropped the forte over this piano here, and perhaps we wanted that over here. But if we were to select this, there's a lot of things we could do, but it is grouped with this. So we can use ungroup or group and have them connected, right? So now none of them are grouped together, and it kind of shows that because they're not blue together, they're not highlighted. So we can ungroup them, and now they're not grouped together. Or we could take some. So let's select this measure, we're going to filter dynamics, and now we're going to group them. And now you can see they're all grouped. It's a nice, easy way to do it. Another cool thing is to duplicate up and down. So we're going to select this, and I'm going to hit this duplicate up button. And now it duplicates the content down here up into the following measure. Now, if there's already stuff in there, what it's going to do is duplicate it up, and now it's got it on another, it's kind of combined them together. So that could be problematic. So you can also duplicate down, which is nice and helpful. Sometimes you're working on something that has, an odd meter or an odd timing section. So let's say these three notes are supposed to be beamed together. So I have a beam together button, and then let's beam these two together. And then let's split the beam here. And now we have that. So it's kind of 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2. An odd thing, but easy to do with the split. Split all beams, right? And then select all the ones you want, and then you can easily beam them all together. All right, so looking out right here, we have a signpost, right, showing C major. Sometimes there's just so much going on here, you want to hide everything. That's what this little monkey is for me. I select that, and then it is hiding all signposts, or I select it again, and it's showing them, which is very helpful. Also, if we were to have multiple voices, right, so let's take this section right here, and let's say we want these all to be up. So we're going to select this measure, we're going to select the top note, and then let's right click, and then under voices, let's do a new voice. So change voice, a new stem up. All right, so now we have that. It's a little awkward looking. So actually, if we select the others, if we select all of these, or we select the whole thing and select the bottom note, let's have these stem downs. Right click here, stem, force stem down. That cleans it up a little bit. But we have two different voices, and an easier way to see that is to show voice colors. So I've got a button on here that says voice colors, and now you can see all of the different voices. And this is especially easy in a situation like this, or if we were to take this and then duplicate this down, we can see that it has pasted it within the same voice. And then quickly we can no colors, turn that off. I also have some buttons if I wanted to change the system that I'm in. I'm in write mode, or if I wanted to move over to engrave. Of course, you can always click these up here, but sometimes you're in the moment and you don't want to change that. I also have it that if I'm in write mode and I want to switch quickly from page to galley mode, I could just do that with a button as opposed to having to go down here. I find these a little bit cumbersome. They're really small, and when I'm working quickly, I just prefer to be able to just hit it and move around. So another thing you could do instead of just having them as buttons is you could have them as pagers. So let's say you have a pager with 3 different pages. So page 1 is going to be in write mode, and then you have all of your different buttons, all the different CC that have to do with when you're writing, and then you have a pager that's just for engrave mode or something like that. And then keep it clean, keep it separate. That's a way to do it as well. So the last thing I want to show is a couple of quick ways that I work in engrave mode. So let's go to engrave. And I've found that when I'm working on a part and I've got to move quickly, I like to easily be able to move through these, and I don't want to have to, click in here and then click over here and then click back and change up here or change down there. So I have buttons that'll do that for me. So edit graphic, edit staff, and then edit notes. It's a quick way, an easy way to just kind of get around. So these are just a couple ideas, kind of my favorite buttons in my template that I use. You could also have notes move to the next voice or the previous voice with just the click of a button, as opposed to having to go into, right click. You could reset where the frames are, reset where the staff is. You could align dynamics. Really anything in that preferences menu with the keybinds, you could set to a CC. So go ahead and explore in there and see what would work for you and for what you're doing. For a lot of the engraving that I'm doing for others and for myself, I want to make it happen as fast as possible, and TouchOSC is really able to make me move a little quicker, especially the grid. I gotta say, the grid is really like the best thing about working with TouchOSC and Dorico. I use that probably the most. I'd love to hear how you are using TouchOSC or any other touch surface with Dorico. Let the community know the tips and tricks that you have for speeding up your workflow. And hopefully you learned something today. You can like this video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We have lots more to cover. And as always, I'll see you next time.